All right, the pictures you're seeing right now are just the conclusion of one of the most important meetings for Africa, which is the 24th Annual General Meeting for ATIDI, and the objectives of this certainly underway and are in swing when you look at the political risk. And of course, this will involve the lenders as well as the investors, how Africa's outlook basically is going to change and is changing when you look at how much money is coming into because of entities such as ATIDI. And talking of financials, bonds as well are also something that we can talk about. Zambia is also on a trajectory where even individuals are getting into bonds. And talking about financials, I have right next to me Mutisunge Zulu, a face and voice that isn't new to ZMBC. Mutisunge, how are you? Have you enjoyed the annual general meeting?
I'm good, thank you. Yes, it's splendid, spectacular, and the right things were said. I mean, clearly you can see that Africa's fortunes are brightening, and Zambia is now back into a decent league of nations. Yeah.
When I was talking to one of the founders, one of the people who've been with ATIDI since its inception, early 2000s, he was talking of how Zambia was very pivotal in the start of this. It was one of the first of the 7. And looking at where we are at in terms of development growth, what we're looking at in terms of how we're going to grow by the end of the year, and then we attach some of these to the objectives of ATIDI. Are we on the right path?
I would say we are on the right track, and it's not shocking that Zambia was one of the founder, members, because Zambia has always been a giant. I mean, if you talk about Zambia, one thing that is very pivotal is copper, and red metal is still talk right now. You've got your electric car era. What do you need to do to make that possible? You need your green metals. The world is decarbonizing. So, and then agriculture as well has always been key for Zambia. Of course, arguably we've not harnessed opportunities, but it's very clear that whatever Zambia is going through right now has become an eye-opener, from energy generation, agriculture, value chains, and how we can leverage off mining to be able to fight poverty, like the minister had said. I think one thing that has really stood out is that, yes, part of a business cycle, we went through that tag of default, and clearly we've seen a successful restructure of dollar bonds as well. I mean, there's $3.3 billion remaining of Sino-Shore debt, but you can see that Zambia is not the only nation that is making strides in terms of debt restructure, only that I think we were the only nation that defaulted. But that tag is gone now. You saw rating agencies in the last 2 weeks did upgrade Zambia, the likes of Standard & Poor's, Fitch, and Moody's. But I think more importantly, if you listen to what the president was saying, was he always emphasizes on capital pricing. And there's this strong feeling that African nations are not profiled the same as other nations and jurisdictions, which is a function of a number of things. I mean, there's political risk factors, there's sovereign ratings that are taken into account, but for the likes of ATIDI, you can see that it's got representation from African nations, and these ECAs are ones that understand the African landscape. And with that said, there was a directive that was given for finance ministers to rethink risk profiling. And you see, when you risk profile, then you come up with acceptable premiums that would then translate into fairer pricing of capital. Look, capital has become a very topical issue. So if your capital is unfairly priced, then the cost of doing business, the cost of lending is high. But if that starts to come down, then clearly that's welcome news for the private sector, and that's how you drive growth and getting this capital to feed into the relevant sectors. You're looking at SMEs, you're looking at corporates, and Africa generally is hungry for growth. There's so much opportunity.
Hungry for growth, Mutisunge. But when you look at ATIDI is doing a good thing, wanting the continent to move as one. But the reality is, some of the African countries have got growth and national development plans going this way. To what extent will ATIDI pull them almost at the same time? It's not realistic to pull at the same time, but how do you get 53, 26, 24 countries moving in the same direction without having to let them get out of track with their own?
I think first things first, let's be fair to ATIDI. It's not the only ECA that can support all 54 African countries. I think the core is for all financial institutions, whether development banks. Africa has other development banks as well. Africa has commercial banks that have muscle, that should be able to rethink this risk profiling and take a risk on the private sector. And that's the only way we're going to drive growth. So I would say the message is that most financial institutions must pick a leaf from ATIDI, and we imagine if we had 10 of ATIDIs, then I think that we would have institutions that would then clearly be driving that requisite growth. So it's not only ATIDI's responsibility, it's the responsibility of every financier in Africa, and we should start thinking about the private sector in Africa as a whole, and that's the only way you're going to drive growth across 24 countries. But I think the positive is that the more countries are being included in ATIDI, I mean, you heard the likes of the new 4 or 5 countries that have joined ATIDI, then you would expect that, yes, those sovereigns would pretty much get support, and ATIDI is growing. But the task is for financiers across Africa to come to the party. You can't leave this to one organization. No.
So in 30 seconds, Mutisunge, the Ministry of Finance, the likes of PIA, zeroing it into a country, how do they maximize it?
Well, Ministry of Finance, one, creates the environment which is conducive for businesses to thrive. I mean, the likes of the PIA, these are statutory bodies that should then speak to their members. You're looking at pension funds. The overdependency should just not be on the likes of NAPSA. You should be talking to insurance companies. All those are pools of funds that can take a risk and participate in the financial economy and sector. That shouldn't just be for banks, but it should be for, within the fund management space. If you're a pool that plays, these are players that are present in the bond market as well. So I think that we need to change our thinking, paradigm shift in thinking. We need to rethink growth in itself and be able to take more risk, opportunity. These play in the capital markets as well. We need to utilize every avenue as well, because growth just doesn't come like that. There has to be application of finances, financing ideas as well, and the insurance. I mean, the insurance sector is very, very critical. I mean, it's risk sharing, it's risk mitigation, and I mean, lending ultimately is the business of trust. I mean, people are not lending each other because they don't trust each other. And in the middle, then you have your insurance companies that come to say, okay, fine, you take a risk on an individual and I will insure and cover you in case the individual does not pay. Now, think of it at a sovereign level. So that's a role that insurance companies must be playing. And I urge insurance companies not to shy away from certain sectors. If you think it's too risky, I mean, look at the times we are living in. We expect products that would cover things like your agriculture, your energy, finance, and So I would say the cake is wide, and
it's wide.
Yes,
it's out of the oven and ready to be. It's baked and ready to be eaten. Thank you so much once again.
Thanks for hosting me. Thank you.
All right, so this is concluding ATIDI when we talk about the annual general meeting, the 24th one, but it has cut across many sectors of not only Zambia, but Africa as a continent, looking at trade, looking at investments, looking at insurance, and looking at development as a whole for the continent of Africa. And you know that when it comes to Zambia hosting some of these events, definitely the likes of the Ministry of Finance and the PIA had a lot of stakeholders in here. They had a lot of collaborations that will make sure that Zambia maximizes from this meeting.